Hello everyone, this is Justin Smythe from nextbigtrade.com. This is the best stage 2 breakouts for November 8th, 2024. Starting off with the red hot artificial intelligence sector, there's multiple super powerful breakouts this week. This sector appears to be going into perhaps a blow off move to the upside, but there still could be multiple weeks from here of huge gains over a short period of time as there's a ton of volume and buying pressure coming into these stocks. Multiple stocks in this sector made huge moves after earnings. App, IONQ were two examples. Upstart, which is on this list, was another one. And there's some that have already reported that started breaking out of bases on huge volume, which is what happened with the stock that we're starting out with, TEM. And TEM was actually on the pullback buy list a few weeks ago. It still kind of started corrected further. I think it was on the pullback buy list around here. It went down further, but then this week it basically made a low and then blasted off higher on massive volume. This stock looks really good. This is a new IPO. It mixes healthcare and AI, which are two super hot sectors. So it's like when you mix some of the best sectors in the market together, you turbocharge the individual stock, and that's what's going on with this stock. I think this stock has potential to really accelerate higher over the next couple of weeks from here. And it has no overhead resistance now. There's no traders that are at a loss if they bought this stock earlier, and that's a good recipe for strong moves to the upside with no overhead resistance. So if we jump down to the daily, where would be a good place to buy this stock? I think there's not going to be too much of a pullback probably, but if we do get a pullback to this shelf right here early next week, it probably will digest this move a little bit. If we get a pullback to the high 60s, I think that'd be a good place to look for an entry. And you could probably set your stop around just below that area as well. I don't think we're going to get a pullback down to this breakout area next week with the market as hot as it is, and I think that might be all we get before this thing resumes higher. So look for a shallow pullback here if you're not in the stock yet. Look at how the volume just explodes here. It's really not compared to the stock's float, this is pretty good volume, but if we see even more explosive volume, then this thing really might accelerate. If we do see if you do get a big downside volume, that'd be where you'd really want to be wary on a pullback. So let's see how the volume is when it does pull back. But overall, this is a great setup. This is a new IPO. These are the types of stocks that capture the market's imagination when the market is really hot and it's in the right sector. Another artificial intelligence stock that has already reported earnings, ODD. This one is also a recent IPO coming out of a base. Volume did accelerate last week. The good thing about this one is it's not extended really at all right now, which is great, if you're doing new buying. And if we jump down to the daily, you could look for a pullback to this breakout area. I don't think we're going to get down there probably in this one either, but if we get any type of a pullback next week, we've even got some support here. That's where you'd want to do some buying, and then looking for this thing to accelerate higher as well. You can see the volume perked up last week, but this thing being in the right sector has explosive upside potential as well, and it's a new IPO. Another artificial intelligence, relatively new stock, SOUN. This one's had monster moves in the past. Back in early 2024, it had a huge stage 2 run on big volume, and then it's kind of had a couple moves higher that have not followed through. This was one that we traded back in July on a pullback buy that worked pretty well just for a week. But now we're starting to break out again above resistance. We've got, volume coming in. Still not super extended. It is a little bit extended here, but not terrible. This one does report earnings, so there's earnings risk. It reports earnings, I think, next week, but so there's that risk out there. But earnings could, explode the stock to the upside as well. So that's, a random variable to contend with, but it's acting really well so far, and the rest of the sector obviously is heating up. You've got big volume here. You could trade against this, this is a well-defined breakout area. So this is a good place to put a stop, and this makes your risk really tight here on the pullback, and then, looking for much higher prices here. So another one, right sector, a good size company where big volume can really explode this higher, not too extended. These are all the factors that are producing a super high quality setup here. Now, UPST is more extended than the rest of these. This one already broke out way back in August, and it took quite a while to really continue higher, but finally continued higher in October, consolidated again, and then monster move on earnings this past week, clearing out this resistance from 2023 finally. But over 100% above the 30-week moving average. That's now way more extended than you'd like. However, what you could do on this stock would be to trade it against this gap up if it does get a sizable pullback next week. So say we get a pullback down to the mid to low 70s, you've got this gap to trade against now, where to put a stop, and then looking for a bounce off of a pullback. So that's kind of how I'd play this. If you're looking for this stock, you've got to wait for a pullback to the gap area, which creates better risk reward, and then look for a resumption higher. This one does have a big short position against it, so that could really accelerate the move. So that would be a reason why to play the pullback here, is if you're looking for a short squeeze basically and a super big acceleration higher. This one also has a mix of financials and AI, kind of like TEM's got healthcare and AI. This one's got financials and AI. So great combination here. Big winning stock. You just need to find a good entry, and I think a pullback to the gap would be the best place to enter this stock at this point. Another AI stock, FRSH, does have overhead resistance. Did take monster volume though, breaking out of a base. The biggest, again, like the downside here is that you've got this resistance that's getting back into. So I would, a stock like TEM to me is better than this one because of the fact that it has no overhead resistance. But this is the right sector, and it's not super extended either above the 30-week moving average. On the daily, you can look for a pullback to the gap, which is not far from at all here, and then looking for resumption of upside after the pullback. Moving to some cryptocurrency stocks, these turned around nicely after the Bitcoin breakout. Coin took some big volume, starting to outperform the S&P 500, breaking above overhead resistance. Probably due for a little bit of a pullback, but, set up to continue higher from here. On the daily, you can see this one broke out, gapped up, and then took strong volume the rest of the week. Probably due for a little bit of a pullback here, but you can look for these kind of former resistance areas as the support to buy against. Probably won't get down to the gap, but you might find a shelf here and then resume higher after a pullback. HOOD is more extended. This one's been in an uptrend for quite a while. Did have a nice pivot after earnings, continuation move off the 10-week moving average. No overhead resistance. Volume wasn't as great as previous moves, but this is a sector leader. On the daily, you've got a breakout, a gap up. Probably can look for a pullback next week to the shelf and then resumption higher here. I don't think this one has an explosive upside as the AI stocks because of the volume coming into AI and some of the recent IPOs. But if you're looking for crypto exposure, these are two good stocks. Moving on to some industrial stocks, LUNR is one that took monster volume earlier in the year multiple times, has consolidated nicely against the 10-week moving average and is starting to break out on volume this week. This one trades like enormous volume for whatever reason, but if we start to get some more explosive volume into this one, this could really push higher. This one has a good market capitalization to really move it higher. It's only $1 billion company. And given the volume, this is really an explosive mix here. On the daily, this one is pretty, has pretty good risk reward against the 20-day moving average and this recent support. So any type of pullback here would be good risk reward, and then looking for resumption higher. This one does have earnings next week as well, so that's a wild card, but you're starting to see a nice increase in volume on the breakout. FREY, a stage 2 investor breakout, massive volume here, still not really extended after the breakout either, above the moving averages. If we jump down to the daily, you can see this one pulled back starting on Friday. Volume though did decline dramatically on the pullback, so might need a little bit more time to pull back. You've got support right here to trade against, looking for resumption higher. This one does have overhead resistance though. Doesn't really have too strong of a sector either, but obviously this is an explosive breakout. A couple prison-related stocks that really blew up after the election. GEO, massive volume. This one is extended, however, so might need more time to consolidate. It's dangerous buying stocks that are this extended in a sector that just exploded, because a lot of times what they'll do is just consolidate for a while, go nowhere, and then the market has a correction and you've kind of tied up your money in a stock going nowhere. So I think these ones are a little bit more risky because they're not in a super hot sector like artificial intelligence, and it's extended. So be careful on stocks like this. On the daily, kind of, losing volume momentum to the upside, you definitely want to wait for a pullback to buy this one. Probably looking for the gap area as a more logical pullback area. So I would wait on this one to see how it acts on the first pullback. CXW, another prison one, monster breakout on volume. Extended though, starting to show a pullback already on the weekly chart. On the daily, you can see it kind of exhausted on Friday, likely due for a pullback to these former support levels or somewhere around here. And we'll see how volume behaves on the pullback. Moving on to some technology stocks, VMEO, explosive breakout to the upside, clearing out its overhead resistance. On the daily, this one basically had a one-day move and then consolidated it the rest of the week. I would look for probably this gap area for a pullback. Not sure I like how it didn't really follow through after day one. That's not great, but it also doesn't really have a strong sector. But the volume was pretty good on the breakout. SRAD, this is a recent IPO, breaking out with no overhead resistance. Big volume here. On the daily, see it broke out the last 2 days of the week, cleared out overhead resistance. Probably looking just to wait for a pullback here, wait for volume to decrease. AAOI, this one I think is artificial intelligence related, but massive volume here, clearing out overhead resistance. This one's extended though, nearly 100% above the 30-week moving average. Definitely want to wait for a pullback here. This one is heavily shorted though, kind of like UPST. Potential for a short squeeze. You got monster volume here. This resistance would probably be a logical area to look for a pullback. And then resumption higher. Utility stock related to artificial intelligence, TLN. This one's been a monster winner in 2024. Obviously well into a stage 2 uptrend, so that's the downside here, but you could probably trade against this breakout back to resistance. You can see how it accelerated after earnings, and then, looking for a pullback here if you were to buy this stock. However, again, this one's way into an uptrend. Unlike the early examples in this video, TEM and ODD are just starting to break out. I much prefer stocks just starting to break out versus something like this. ARIS, oil and gas related stock, monster volume on the breakout, clears out all of its overhead resistance. On the daily, kind of rallied all week, looking for a pullback to resistance. And oil and gas sector did get better this week, which is a good sign for a stock like this. Consumer cyclical stock Bros, monster turnaround this week, huge volume, breaking above overhead resistance, big earnings surprise, biggest weekly upside volume ever in this stock. Not super extended either. On the daily, you can see the gap up. This was one of the biggest gaps of the week, and you've got nice support there right at the gap. So another pullback to the gap would be a good place to buy this stock, and then looking for a resumption higher. Finally, one that isn't extended that took huge volume, ACHR, electric aviation stock breaking out of a base, biggest weekly upside volume ever. On the daily, kind of surprising it didn't really move a lot higher given the dramatic volume. Does have overhead resistance, that might be the issue, but not extended whatsoever. This is the least extended stock in the list this week. So you can really buy this anywhere here and look for a resumption higher. You've got tight risk reward right where it is. It does have, again, the overhead resistance is the problem, but absolutely monster volume here. So just a deluge of breakouts this week. Artificial intelligence is leading, and there's stocks that are just starting to break out there. I think that's the top theme to focus on. And there's potential for some huge moves, I think, over the next 2 to 3 weeks in the market right now.